But how many of your relationships today, how many of our relationships today are deal friends versus real friends, as Arthur Brooks calls it? How many people are transactions versus true relationships? So you've got 1,000 to 2,000 connections on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And at the end of the day, you feel like all those people are a part of your life. It's hard to build relationships if you're invested in a bunch of disconnected connections. Why is it that the depth of relationships matter so much more than width of relationships? It's such an important topic, and I just finished a great conversation with Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist, who has a huge following and is a relationship expert, was a counselor and coach for many, many years, coaching so many people with his attachment boot camp nowadays to help relationships flourish, especially for high performers. But it really got me thinking. When I think about the depth of relationships, we're in a day and age today where people are lonelier than ever. They're less connected, yet in their brains, they think they're more connected. So you've got 1,000 to 2,000 connections on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And at the end of the day, you feel like all those people are a part of your life. And they are. In some ways, they really are. I mean, I love the fact that I get to see some of my childhood best friends' children grow up. I get to see the sports that they're participating in. I get to see the challenges they have in their families in a positive way, and all the things that are happening. I love to be a part of that and to feel like I'm a part of it, but I'm really watching it. I'm not really a part of it. And the depth of a relationship is, I believe, probably misjudged by so many of us today, because those very relationships that we have on social media, so many times we'll walk by the person that we're friends with in the supermarket and we may not talk to them in that moment. And that's just weird. It's odd. And when you think about relationships, these are friendships, these are acquaintances, these are, connections. But how is it that we could be so connected and yet so lonely? So connected and so disconnected. And that's what it got me thinking as I talked to Adam about relationships in general. We got into the conversation around our intimacy in relationships, and I mean, there's so many levels of this. But as I finished, all I could think about was how so many people are struggling with feeling like they're a part of something today, and they're disconnected and they're less connected than they've ever been. And when I look at my social media friends, I send videos and I stay connected. I've got a couple buddies who all I do is send funny videos from Theo Vaughn or anybody that cracks us up, um, Bobby Lee and Andrew Sortino or any of these. I mean, they comedians normally, and I send this stuff to a couple buddies, and it might be all we say to each other. And I haven't seen some of them in 2 years or more. I still love them. They're still great friends of mine, but it's not the same. The depth was there in the beginning. And so we're maintaining the friendship because the depth was laid in the beginning. But how many of your relationships today, how many of our relationships today are deal friends versus real friends, as Arthur Brooks calls it? How many people are transactions versus true relationships? And what it got us thinking about and talking about today was in our marriages, how many things are transaction based versus truly relationship based? And what are you doing to invest in that relationship? So, in the beginning, we started talking about intimacy, and I've never talked about intimacy in any capacity on this podcast, or not to this level. And it was really interesting to talk to a relationship expert and to pick his brain, but he was kind of picking mine. And he was like, what do you think are the most important things? And obviously, intimacy is really important. But for me, I talked about connection, because shallowness of intimacy is sex is a transaction, but to have a connection and to have true intimacy with somebody, with my wife, is so powerful. It's freedom. It provides me energy. It gives me something to look forward to, someone to go through life with and to be connected with on a deeper level than any other person in my life. And the depth of our marriage is so dependent upon the intimacy, but it's also the intimacy of the connection with the conversations. What are we willing to talk about? What are we willing to share? What are we not willing to share? I've always struggled with the process of sharing the process. I'm a results oriented individual. And so if I'm in a war, I take it to the battle, and I want to leave it on the battlefield and come home and not have to discuss it. And the older I get, the more I realize how powerful it is to be at war, to be in a battle, to have a challenge in your life and to share it with the person you love, and to gather feedback and to gather input and to have somebody outside of yourself. And the older you get, the more and more this becomes important. It's important to me as our kids move on to the next chapters of their life. It's pretty important to me to have a partner that we're growing with and not dying. And so many relationships, as Adam and I were talking about, are dying and not growing. We talked and hit on generational differences. How, in the generations, there's still a gap in the importance and how people actually invest in each other. And, I talked about fighting for each other, and not in an unhealthy way, but just fighting for each other's attention, fighting for each other in general was so powerful early in our marriage. And it went from something where we were setting boundaries and we were laying out what was important to us, all the way to these are non-negotiable items. These are things that we have to provide each other to show love, to feel love, to give the love that the other person needs. And it's always interesting to me, the older I get, how vivid and clear it is to see that everything is about giving of yourself to somebody in the way that they need it, not taking for yourself what you need. It's such a drastic difference. And I think when we're talking about intimacy, the depths of that connection, the depths of what someone needs, Adam Lane Smith laid out, there are a multitude of, say, 3 main important things that you need to establish that are important to you, and then really get deep on those items. And it just reminds you again the importance of the depth of the relationship. Passing each other and high-fiving is a part of marriage. It's a part of life. It's a part of relationships. Having friendships that ebb and flow, seeing them all the time and then not seeing them at all. But how deep do you get when you're together? How are you investing in that other person? How are you a part of their life when they're going through challenges, when they're going through something? This is where social media can be an add-on, not a detractor, but something that can add on to the relationship's balance. I can't tell you how many times I see something happen on social media that's happening to a friend, someone that I do have a deep relationship with, and I just pick up the phone and I leave a voice text for them. Hey, saw that your son did this. So awesome. Just wanted to let you know how amazing that is. Again, investing in what's important to them. And now what do we get out of that? So many people are like, well, what do I get out of that? What are they doing for me? Do they ever call me and do that? Doesn't matter. If the friendship's worth it, if the relationship has that depth, it's worth it for you to invest in them. It'll come back to you. It'll come back to me. There's no question in my mind. And if it doesn't, I feel good giving. I feel good sharing what I feel is important with somebody. And so we talked a lot about the whole dynamic of relationships and the depth of these relationships. And it makes you think, are you exploring conversations with your spouse, with your significant other in a deep way? Are you evaluating what's important to them as they grow up, as they grow, as your children change, as your family dynamic changes? How do you check in? What are we doing to get ourselves in the spot that we need to be in to grow together and not apart? Especially men. I mean, men really struggle with this because they kind of expect everything to stay the same as it was when they first start. And it doesn't stay the same. It's nothing like it was in the beginning. And so many men are caught in that. And there's that conversation of, she doesn't show any interest in me anymore, or I don't understand. Like I do all the same things. But if we're not checking in with each other, the same things may not be anything to the other person anymore. So I shared that my wife and I have had what we call ROM weeks. It can be a weekend, but ROM, when it was first introduced to me, in a way where we were at a challenging point. Our second child had been born. We weren't. Our marriage was at no risk. We weren't in a major turning point, but I definitely felt like we were going further apart than getting closer together for a short amount of time. And we ended up heading to Tortola on a ferry. And my wife gives me a huge hug and a kiss. And she says, "Hey, this is going to be the ROM weekend for us." And I was like, I love the way that sounds. I don't know what it means, but I'm super excited about it. And she goes, "It means rekindle our marriage." And what a powerful phrase. Just naming the process was powerful in itself. And what did it include? Well, it's something that we started to do all the time. And it meant that we were going to have one on one attention. We were going to put our phones down. We were going to be present with each other. I was going to not work for extended periods of time and actually look at her in the eyes while we had a drink or had a great dinner and just listen and talk, be heard, for both of us. Have time alone, have time away from kids, remind each other who we were before we were parents, and then who we are now. What's changing, what's important, what's not important. You meet new friends on these trips. You often meet new people and you have a new relationship with friends where you're learning about them and you're sharing funny stories and you're learning new boundaries and new challenges from other people. And you get to see each other in your natural habitat. I'm using my air quotes here, where you're like, "Oh, I forgot how much I love it when she does this." Or "I love the way he just meets new people and we have such a great night." See, when you separate to get closer, you have that spark that can turn back into the thing that got you in love in the first place. We can't just love each other, we have to like each other. And if we like each other, it develops into something special and it creates depth. And depth is important because when shit hits the fan, when there's challenges in your life and your family, when you disagree or you're moving in a different direction, you got to have that foundation. You got to have the roots down way below the surface. And it takes time and energy to do that. Adam Lane Smith talked about just setting aside 30 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day to reconnect. And, we put 30 minutes into workouts, we put 30 minutes into walks, we put 30 minutes into, email and anything else. I mean, way more than that. Sauna and cold plunge for me is 30 minutes a day. I don't do 30 minutes in the plunge, but you know what I'm saying. The point is that can we dedicate time to each other to learn more about each other, to give of ourselves to the other person and to like each other? And the ROM is just a great way to connect. What I learned in our marriage was every 6 months, this was mandatory. Every quarter, it was preferred. And a weekend a month was powerful. And if we could do something in that realm, we were investing in each other. And 21 years later, I'm very, very happy that that's happened. And we're not perfect. We are not a perfect marriage. We don't have it all figured out, but we love each other and we're growing together, not apart. And so when I think about relationships and I get to interview somebody with so much experience and a 500,000 followers on social media, running their own boot camp video course, it's a 7-hour course. I really believe what a great way to learn about each other together. What a great way to explore where you want to go together. And the last thing that I'll talk about briefly from this conversation is this. I am blown away at how people get so caught up in the results of a relationship. And what I mean by that is when you're in the middle of it, you're thinking about the big weekend or the great night out or how you're not getting the attention you need or you're not giving the attention the other person needs. There's all these variables that go in, but it's the big moments, the celebrations, the events, the family dinners, the birthdays, whatever it is. It's big stuff, right? And then you wake up one day and you're thinking back on when your kids were little and I'm going to have an adult son for the first time. And so a lot of you can appreciate this as you've been through this transition or you're approaching it. But all you think about is the mundane. All you miss is the boring. You miss the moments of wrestling with them on the couch. You miss the moments of having a dinner where they're asking you questions that are hilarious, or asking you about school, or the things that you just won't get back. And the mundane is where the magic is. The boring is where love exists. It's where you have a chance to just be yourself and be present and be where your feet are. And when I think about love and I think about our love quadrant and the who's that matter most, I think about relationships. It brings me back to what's pulling us away from those in our lives today. And it's these phones that are in our hands all the time. It's hard to build relationships if you're invested in a bunch of disconnected connections. So, for me, I will continue to try to be the best version of myself, investing in the people I love the most, remembering that the mundane are the moments that are the most fun and the magical. And I'll continue to learn from people like Adam Lane Smith. And I might even do the boot camp. My wife and I might do the boot camp to learn about each other and to reconnect in a different way. We're always open to new ROMs and new ways to learn. But I will attach the boot camp in the show notes. I will make sure that there's an opportunity for you to go to it through this podcast. And I encourage you to do stuff together. When you do the work, that's where that boring is, but that's also where you're building those roots. And the love will grow much deeper, much more consistent. And I think it really makes a big difference. So listen to conversations about these relationships, invest in each other, and continue to invest in your friendships. Continue to do the things that matter most. I will do the same thing. Send a voice text to somebody today that just says, hey, I was thinking about you and I wanted to let you know I saw this and I just wanted to tell you it was awesome. Do something out of the ordinary, even if it's just an ordinary thing that you're commenting on. Watch how magical that could be.